thank you so much for agreeing to be our next interview topic and discussing the upcoming TRO 3025 remastered, which is not its official name. It's called Centennial Edition, I think.
I think so, yeah. I can never remember myself either.
I will definitely have to look that up. But anyway, thanks so much. Before we begin, we'll just do brief introductions for anybody who doesn't know who you are. Who are you?
I am Anthony Scroggins. Some know me as Shimmering Sword of old days on the internet. And I'm the miniatures art director for Catalyst Game Labs BattleTech. Occasionally dip into other things like Leviathans, helping out with that as that ramps up.
Very cool.
Um, but yeah, mostly just focus on making as many BattleTech minis as possible, and I guess we cover all the technical readout line art as well. That kind of rolls into the same process.
Fair, fair. And everybody, of course, wants to know what is your BattleTech story? What got you into the universe, and what keeps you playing BattleTech?
Yeah, it was a long time ago. That's how most of our stories start, and has started catching hints of the video games as a kid. I didn't know what they were, but I was fighting Mech Warrior demos. I think like Mech Warrior 2 demo and Mech Warrior 3. Eventually, I owned, or we had a family computer, and I got to play Mech Warrior 4, and that locked me in there. Really enjoyed that. Mech Commander as well. Basically, all the video games of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I got into that. I grew up in New Zealand, so there wasn't really a big wargaming scene there, so not a lick of BattleTech to be found, as far as I was aware as a younger person. Um, but eventually, there was the era of MechWarrior Dark Age. I played a bit of that while kind of just going through the internet, the pre-Sarna days of like how much BattleTech stuff you could find on forums and little news sites. And yeah, once I moved to the US, I was able to uh, just engage with a lot more. And nowadays, with BattleTech booming again, I can actually play full tabletop games whenever I want, essentially.
Right on.
Um, but no, long ago still, when I was getting into being an artist and kind of committing to that, I still really enjoyed MechWarrior and BattleTech, so I did quite a bit of fan art for that. And then I started getting fan commissions and kind of became popular as one of the more available color illustrators for fan commissions. And from there, Brent Evans saw my stuff and said, "Hey, do you want to do that for real?" And picked me up for Catalyst Game Labs. The funny thing is, the first illustrations I didn't even have mechs in them. He had me do people, which is I'm not terrible at, but at the time, not my strong suit, and still figuring out the kind of style that BattleTech wants. Nowadays, I enjoy when I get to do a Mech Warrior or some other type of character illustration. But yeah, I think my first TRO I worked on was XTRO Merrick, and did a few good pieces in there and a lot of really not quite good ones. Kinda that encounter this a lot when I bring people in too, is just your first assignments, you're a bit like afraid to overstep or you overdo it on trying to match the official style and you kind of lose your own, your own skills there for a bit and choke up. So I definitely choked up on my first few mechs, but settled in quick and it's been fun ever since.
All right, well, just because I'm curious now, which were your first few mechs?
So the Merrick XTRO had like an awesome Jackal,
Okay.
think what's the one? A few refits in it as the XTROs do, and then a few new ones. So there was the Pandaris, which I believe is a Orion chassis, like full rebuild.
Mm-hmm.
Um, doesn't really look like one unless you point it out. And then the Sarissa, I think, was a ground up police mech. Of course, police mechs come with lots of anti-infantry weapons for
Yep.
a little more than policing. Um,
That's what they call riot control.
yeah, but hey, maybe one day, I would enjoy having the Pandaris revived and rebuilt as a production mech. I kind of liked that one.
I remember seeing the Jackal. I mean, it's better than the original Jackal. So, I mean,
I think I did okay there by way of the Jackal's just an egg with legs on
yeah.
it.
And a PVC
Um,
in the shoulder.
mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, those were your first mechs, but we, of course, have to answer the all important question of what's your favorite mech?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always give the most lame answer to this one is my favorite mech is whatever cool mech we've recently worked on, because I just work on so many, it all blurs together. Obviously, Marauders and Timberwolves and Warhammers are cool, but I get really excited for whatever new thing we're bringing out. So, like, say at the tail end of funding, or no, it was the MechCon, no, sorry, Adepticon launch event for the Mercenaries Kickstarter, and we had hit all our stretch goals and wanted to decide what to add and last, and we came up with the Blood Asp. That was a really cool one to work on
Mhm.
at the time, and yeah, more recently getting mechs like the Akuma done for the Kurita force packs, and kind of all the samurai mechs were really fun to work on, though a lot of work.
Mhm.
All those armor panels are just extra detail to manage and make work at a miniature scale. But yeah, more cool ones coming up.
Right on. We'll maybe get to discuss some of those cool miniatures.
Hmm.
First, let's talk about some of those redesigns that you did because you were the guy who actually did the unseen mechs. That's the
Hmm.
Warhammer Classic, Rifleman, Marauder, Stinger Wasp, all those things that used to be born out of anime but eventually got adopted and sort of converted into BattleTech's own style.
Hmm.
Um, how do you how did you approach redesigning something that is as iconic as the Marauder or Warhammer?
Hmm. Yeah, those two fall into the kind of extra case of how much they were iterated on and the time spent, because I'd already done fan redesigns of those before Catalyst came up to the, is it ready? Can we do it? What are the legal ramifications? And so I'd already, at that point, drawn the Marauders several times, and even kind of through like fan interaction, focus tested. All right, what do you want to see? Does this look good? What adjustments to make? So I'd already spent a lot of time on the Marauder before it even became a Catalyst assignment. And then when that came around, it was just more like, all right, now what does Randall and Brent and Ray want to see? All my good bosses, and it got to a point of like, okay, there's enough changing here that I'd rather once again start from scratch. So for the Marauder, yeah, there was a first attempt to take what people know as the Shim Marauder and make that work as an official one. But instead, we went ground up, um, got a more curves in some places, more angular in other places, um, and that's what we came up with. I think the Warhammer was a bit less of a full redo. They just wanted some proportion changes and other things to what I'd already drawn with the Warhammer, and then just really locking in the details and stuff. Um, but I still look back at the pre-official designs and really like them. I'd like maybe in the future we'll get to do resculpts and or alternates. Originally, we did want people talk about how different factions would have slightly different looks to their mechs with different factories. We did look at that. That was the original plan, is to have multiple artists like myself and Alex Iglesias and Matt Plog all do the same mechs multiple times. But I think it became a bit of a logistical mess, and it costs a lot of money too. And Catalyst wasn't swimming in the cash at the time.
I mean, as far as I'm aware, they're not swimming the cash now to do
Yeah, there's
like a
been a few
dozen
road
different.
bumps. It's very feast and famine. You know, you get a bunch of product in and it sells and it's great, or you do a Kickstarter, or even more so, once a Kickstarter goes to retail and can keep selling all over again, yeah, we make good money. But yeah, when other things pop up, lately it's been many things. So, but we're still, I think we're making it through. It's just tighten the belt a little bit.
Fair. So we're not going to get a dozen different Marauders. We'll just have to have a few of them. That's fine. I think we can do
Uh-huh.
that. This is a simple one. What was the hardest mech to redesign? I believe most of the unseen mechs are also going to be in TRO 3025, but specifically for
hmm
the mechs in TRO 3025 Centennial Edition.
hmm
What was the hardest mech to redesign, and what was the easiest mech to
hmm
redesign there?
Yeah, I think the hardest still remains as the unseen, especially those main ones. I think the first three mechs we did, and this was over 10 years ago now, the Marauder, the Warhammer, and the Locust, and it was uh, simply because they had to be done really well, and management was just like squeezing me with the like every little pixel had to be this way or that, and differences of opinion. So it's more so just everyone's personal investment meant more people had to be happy about it. So more back and forth. But as we've gone on and the system's developed, it gets easier. So kind of to the point where if some mech's like really ugly and obscure, it's often the easiest one to do because you can change it more and less people are invested in it. And some people that are curious about it are looking forward to uh, mechs becoming a bit more pretty. And like, there's a lot of mechs that have really good weapons loadouts, but you might not use them because they look so funky on the table. But if they look good and the weapons are good, you're going to see a lot more use. So
Mhm.
one that I wouldn't say is unloved, but was really easy to do in 3025 um, was the Jaeger mech. Because I think everyone's had a good vision of how they want that mech to look, and it's really not all that different to what the original line art looks like. That one's just easy to roll in. So, yep, let's just make the Jaeger mech a little more pretty, and boom, it's done. And I think it came out looking really good. The miniature looks amazing. The line art looks cool. Um, Pretty straightforward one.
Right on. Um, Now there are still plenty of mechs that we're still waiting to have redesigned. Not so
Mm.
much from the 3025s, but from 3050s onwards. If you could pick one mech that hasn't been updated for the modern era with the redesign, either by you or by one of your many artists,
hmm
which mech would it be?
Oh, I'd say very close between the Mad Cat Mark II and the Fafnir. Um,
Okay.
and just you'll find a lot of it is MechWarrior 4 nostalgia. Like anything through those three games, I liked all those mechs, and we've got to do most of those mechs at this point. Um, just getting to the Inner Sphere Omnis and a few more of the bigger mechs. But yeah, I always really liked the Fafnir and the Mad Cat Mark II as kind of end game units you could get, and they've always looked fairly cool. Maybe the Fafnirs looked a little funky in the original art.
A little weird.
But we've
Very much a
seen
box.
between MechWarrior 4 and MechWarrior Online and other times it's been made to look really nice, and I'd like to see that in miniature form.
Very cool. Okay, so we've also had a few alternate universe products either announced or are on their way to here, or possibly here already, depending on the time when this gets posted.
hmm
Starting with BattleTech Gothic. But we've also heard reports, or at least I've heard, that there's going to be a BattleTech anime and Rocket Age, or
hmm
like golden age of sci-fi kind of thing going on. Which of these genres are you sort of most excited to be working on? And are there any
mm
genres that haven't been announced yet, but you'd really love to kind of give a BattleTech flair to them?
Yeah, that's the kind of thing. There's endless possibilities there. The anime one would be cool to me because aside BattleTech, I do like mecha anime a bit here and there. Don't watch all of it, but I enjoy it. Um, so, I mean, even BattleTech had the Japanese BattleTech version, and some of that stuff inspired me. Even our modern Stalker has quite a bit of reference out of the Japanese Stalker.
Mhm.
So being able to put, and kind of the thought of like, well, how many different type of Japanese anime flares can we put on these mechs, or are we gonna keep it all locked in? I'm not sure on that yet. Gothic, I think, was a really obvious one because our mechs are already chunky, and it's an interesting mix of low-tech, high-tech settings. So yeah, you just put cathedrals on our mechs, and they fit right in.
Yeah, just
And
Art Deco and Atlas, and you're done.
I think Marco did a great job with those. Yeah, because they kind of talked about online or at Adepticon is I was almost entirely not involved in that one getting done. Marco wasn't yet art director, and they kind of cut his teeth on that one of like, here's the list of mechs we want. Go ahead and redesign them, and then I said, hey, here's some sculptors that have free time. They can refit our mechs into those visuals for you, and so they did a pretty good job of it. I did ask in the future, like, yeah, I'd like to design a few. Still is a good idea to have me not art directing them, so I can keep focusing on mainline stuff, and then when Marco has time, he can do these alternate universe things, and just little fun things, and plenty of them are going to make great proxies for just regular play, and it'll be interesting to see what the actual like alternate universe scenarios are like and what kind of legs those have. You know, how many people are going to play strictly Gothic BattleTech, or probably not all the time, but you know, how many games are they going to put in where that's the only material they use? But I would the like anime style mecha would be cool, and I agree with a lot of people bringing up like World War I or World War II theme would
Hmm.
be really cool, like a
So like,
diesel punk.
yeah, I could see that. Like Diesel Punk, anything really.
It always looks good.
Yeah.
There's the funny thing is in 3025 I've brought in an artist. Um, on Instagram he goes by Patso Katso, and probably a lot of BattleTech Instagram users have seen his stuff. Right when Gothic was being cooked up, he just was basically doing like Gothic style mechs himself just for fun. And we're like, oh, if the timing had been right, we could have brought him in earlier to work on these. But I have really enjoyed his stuff, so I brought him in to help with 3025, and he really killed it on a few of the designs there.
Oh, well, speaking of 3025, let's get into TRO 3025 Centennial Edition. I actually did write it down there, so now we know what it's called, Centennial
Yeah,
Edition, because in universe it's being written 100 years after the
yeah,
original TRO was written, and given a bunch of updates and like corrections, and we were drunk when we wrote this part. We fixed it now.
yeah, yeah. But I
Okay.
think there's some aspects of not fixing stuff.
Oh,
Is more of a historical document type thing. Yep.
right
Yeah.
on. One of the cool things that's going to be coming out of it is we're going to see more aerospace redesigns, aerospace
Hmm.
fighters. We've already got the Shylone and the Visigoth, and those are great, but I would like more. And
Yeah.
they're also being updated in the same way that the mechs are. So, how would you describe the overall design philosophy for the redesigned aerospace fighters in TRO 3025?
Hmm. Yeah, it's one of those interesting ones where a tank is not too different from a mech as far as shape language on your surfaces, but
Mm-hmm.
something that has to fly has to have some certain considerations. So we do kind of, it's a little more open, and like the original, there's stuff that works well with original aerospace designs. I think part of that also is BattleTech started with sci-fi artists that they could get their hands on, but there wasn't a Western mecha culture yet. So they kind of had to wing it on mechs. But for tanks, you know, all vehicles, those are already like common sci-fi things. So it was a lot easier for, all right, I want to do an aerospace fighter. Let's just look at what other sci-fi artists like Sid Mead and was it Chris Foss are doing at the time. So I think they had a better basis to start from. Still a lot of funky shapes, but you can massage those shapes. So it was more just take, yeah, what does the highest tech jets look like these days? Let's take a little inspiration from that, and then a little inspiration from general modern sci-fi, and then merge it with BattleTech and our personal styles and see what happens.
Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing everything. We have seen a little bit with a preview that just got released, I think, like a week or two ago, and it's looking good. Um, let's move on to what was your favorite aerospace fighter to redesign.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and of course I had this in mind, and then I've forgotten it, which one I worked. So let me just pull up my little demo copy of the TRO if I can find it here. So I was like, oh, where did I put it? There. And scroll back up here. Or is it down? Yes. Because while I did get to do a few myself, I was like, all right, I need to delegate this out more. I know I had another one in mind, but one that does pop up that was a bit more of a collaboration between Marco and I. Right at the end, we were like, all right, we did it. Everything's done. Handed it in, and then Ray Rastia comes in and says, like, well, where are these two? And I panic and I look back, and sure enough, those were on the list given to us to do. It's just when I made my worksheet, I just didn't paste them in there.
Oops.
So one of them was the Transgressor,
Okay.
where Marco did a quick silhouette, and I was like, he's heading off to bed. I'm like, here, I'll do a few proportion changes to it, and then kick it back to you. He was going to handle the whole thing, but then I just got on a roll and just designed the whole thing out in one shot, and then he took it back and did the line art for it. But that one came out looking pretty cool. But what's another that I worked on here? I mean, somewhat similar with the Reaver. That's another one that I designed and then handed off to Marco to finish. But I guess I was going to cheat a bit. I mean, it's still aerospace, but I really liked working on the Leopard dropship.
Mm-hmm.
Said, okay, very early on in the project, the Leopard needs to look really cool. It's a common dropship that people want to use. And it's always looked a little funky, and especially in miniatures form, but in a lot of line art, it's just like a little ballooned out and oddly proportioned, and looks a lot better in Mech Warrior, recent Mech Warrior 5 and stuff, but then it goes full blocky. I'm like, oh, we can bring that back a bit and be a bit more faithful to the original Leopard. So working on that was really fun, and it came out great. We're been fully, initially we just need some 3D models to be viewable at one angle to get line art done, but we've been going back and fully finishing the Leopard, and interestingly finding that even though I don't try to stick to those like Canon measurements that are listed in the original TROs. They came out really close. So yeah, it's interesting what you can end up with.
Cool. Okay, so we're redesigning the aerospace fighters, and in comparison to some of the original Battle Mech art, I think a lot of the aerospace art still kind of holds up pretty well. And it's because I think they were a little bit more well-grounded than the Battle Mechs, which were trying to take inspiration from Japanese anime, whereas the planes are all kind of based on, some of them look very much like similar to aircraft we've already seen. Like, I think the Stingray is basically just a Grumman X-29, just a little bit more bulbous. That's like the forward swept wings demonstrator that they had in the 80s. And things like the Reaver and Shiloh and Chippewa, they're basically just kind of variations on flying wings, and we've seen plenty of those. I think the B-2 has been in the news a lot recently for some reason. Um,
hmm
so, was it harder or easier to redesign these aerospace fighters because they are still kind of very grounded?
Yeah, no, their aerospace is absolutely easier to redesign, both from the, yeah, a lot of them have good things to build upon, and also aircraft are a little bit more of a straightforward thing. We don't have to make sure all the limbs are working, and a lot more of the weapons are embedded. But yeah, and some of them just have cool geometry, like you said. While now we're looking at integrating what modern jets might use as far as shape and surface language. We still really like that Cold War, post World War II era of just like what wacky stuff can actually fly, and it is crazy what other countries, but I think a lot more so what the U.S. government got to fly into the air, shapes wise. Um, and yeah, flying wings. That was like a World War II development, and then disappeared, and now it's back for
It
I guess
never
different
really
reasons for
went
stealth.
away. Like the Brits yet had the Vulcan
That's true.
bomber in like the
Yeah.
60s, 70s.
hmm
And I don't know. Northrop has always been trying to sell flying wings to the American government, and they just had to wait for stealth to come along to make them buy it.
Yeah, when started, oh, not everything has to be able to be able to dogfight.
Yeah.
It just needs to fly level. Um, yeah, the I think a lot of the designs had potential. There's definitely a few that are just extremely terrible looking, and they're not even like interesting terrible. They're just bad. I think the Lucifer was very uninspiring. That now looks pretty cool. And what do we got? I mean, yeah, there's ones like say the cheetah, like it looks kind of funky, but it
Mhm.
still works, and um, there's a big mixture of art. There's some stuff we'd already done, like you said, the Visigoth, and um, oh, my brain's not working.
Shiloh.
Shylone, yeah. And then there was a few where Alex Iglesias had done artwork for those within the last 15 years that still held up pretty good, and we just, all right, let's just touch those up a little bit and go from there. And then, of course, all the rest was the art team just blitzing through them as fast as we could.
Right on. Okay, so most of the planes we touched on this are still basically plane shaped, but there are still a few that are kind of out there in terms of like sci-fi fighter design. I think the Sparrowhawk is probably the best example of that. It's got that kind
hmm
of Buck Rogers kind of look to it, where it's these pointy lasers and very stubby wings, and it doesn't look like it could fly, but you definitely get the impression that it's like sci-fi fighter jet. Corsair is
Yeah.
another one. This one's a little bit more Battlestar Galactica in terms of its
hmm
delivery, um, but they're markedly different from everything else you'd see in 3025, that book. Uh, was there a path to giving these particular aerospace fighters a common design language with the rest of the fighters that were redone in TRO 3025?
Kind of just say no. A lot of those more interesting shaped ones still held up good, often because they were referencing either anime or, like say, Battlestar Galactica. The Corsair and some of its artwork is just straight up a Viper. Uh, there's one or two that are like, that doesn't even look like a Corsair. It's somebody just drew a Viper at that point. And yeah, I'd say the Sparrowhawk is one that's kind of always looked pretty cool. And that's one. There's a period year or two ago where we're like, hey, let's just get a few more aerospace designs done just for art use, because you only want so many shallones in every backdrop of
Yeah.
every battle. We had a bit of that going on, and the funny thing was, I think Piranha Games was doing that a bit too. Or there's just a few sources are like, oh,
Yeah.
they're everywhere. We need
Like,
to get some other aerospace. So we done the Sparrowhawk and the Stingray. The Stingray was ended up in BattleTech Universe book as a cutaway. Um, but no, those kind of designs, it's good. It's similar. to the mechs, where you want to have this big visual variety. We may end up homogenizing some of the surface detailing here and there with our modern efforts, but we still want those like silhouette shapes to have a lot of variety, and so that's why, yeah, even the funky stuff like our flying frisbees are still around because they're different, and
Speaking
you can
of
make them work.
those,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So, how do you make something as bizarre as the Shalagar or the Thrush with its weird flying saucer wings? How do you make that work as an
Hmm.
aerospace fighter? Uh, how did you update those so that they don't look quite so ridiculous as because there weren't too many ridiculous aerospace fighters, but I think those ones kind of popped out at me as
Mm.
how does this function?
Yep. No, the funny thing is they went pretty smoothly, and those two frisbee fighters is where, yeah, I brought in Patso, and I need to make sure I pull up his proper name so we can give him some good credit here. Scrolling down through all these assignments, but Patrick, yeah, I was like, okay, he's really good at intentionally making things funky. So when I asked if he wanted to come on board for doing some aerospace fighters, I said, "Hey, do you want to do these two ones here?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, those are awesome. They're silly." And he did a really good job. And kind of well, it's not quite that, if you take a silly design and you just put a modern stealth fighter like an F-35 cockpit on it, it does quite a bit for it. And just some of those surface lines and things you can do. So when people look through this new 3025, I think they're going to be impressed with how cool some of these old weird looking ones are, and some of them did change a lot and some of them didn't change much at all. Yes, it's those were I'd say fun ones, and you don't have to do too much with a giant circle with a cockpit and engine strapped to it. They have some of the lower detail levels compared to the rest, but they still look great.
All right. So I want to talk about this. You kind of touched on a little bit earlier that at least some of the redesign elements that we see kind of has inspiration from like Cold War era jet design or post World War II jet design. And I've noticed, especially something like the Visigoth, that you can point to it and say, okay, well, these wings kind of look like the U-2. These engine nacelles in the back, and its overall tail design kind of looks like an F4 Phantom. And we've got these big canards at the front and gaping air intakes for its engines, which remind me of a Saab 37 Viggen, although you could name several other more modern jet fighters for something similar. Can you give us a preview of what other last century or even current century jet fighters, what aspects of these modern military designs might we see in TRO 3025?
Yeah, and so in some of those previous cases, like I was just pulling up the Visigoth here. Obviously, the U2 was a big one, and then the if it's which B is it B1? The Lancer, the one with the swing wings that we still occasionally use.
Chippewa
Kind of
also has
combining.
swing wings. It doesn't make any sense because I don't know why you'd have swing wings on a flying wing. You're just a wing.
Yeah, I
Why
mean,
make
the
them?
one is
Doesn't make
you need
sense
to
to me.
fit it inside a dropship,
Oh,
and
okay.
it's got all that wing. So yeah, we did give the Chippewa the swing wing because I think it had like what could be construed as a swing wing in the old artwork. So we kept that around, I think. But let's see, Chippewa. Of course, I don't have all the art in the same place all the time, but yeah, that was an interesting one. And yeah, it kind of came up in a discussion online recently that I did indeed give the Visigoth swing wings, and the original does not have swing wings.
Yes, I
And the
recall that.
whole talk was, uh, why would they do that if that's not in the original? Well, we can change stuff, and there's a lot of undefined aspects of early Aerospace artwork, and I thought, well, that one has these very, very long wings and those kind of U2 style wings that just don't look very fast. So what if it wanted to get a little faster in atmosphere or tighten up its is it angular momentum? I forget what that term for, you know, the tighter you pack all the mass into the center point, the quicker it'll be able to spin and maneuver.
Yeah, angular momentum. Pretty sure that's it.
So I was like, yeah, maybe
Pretty
it's
sure.
going to want to tuck its wings in sometimes. Um, and it does look pretty cool with its wings swept back. I don't think we've depicted that, um, except maybe in the line art. I'm not sure. But yeah, sometimes we're just like, hey, let's integrate, a real aircraft feature into these just to spice them up a little bit. But as far as once we buckled down into this TRO project, it was, yeah, like informing everyone to think of Cold War and modern technology and the design language there, but also by then we'd had a few pieces done and lots of reference to go by, and it opened up a bit more and like, hey, let's get it done instead of doing the deepest like design language studies on every single fighter. But we definitely did that with a lot of the early ones, is really pulling in and deciding how we want aerospace to look going forward for BattleTech.
Right on. Um, TRO 3025 only has aerospace fighters, but I've had conversations with other people in Catalyst that once you start talking aerospace fighters, you also have to start bringing in the rest of the space things like jump ships and warships. Are we going to see warships get any redesigns in the near term future? And are you excited for that challenge? Because it seems like it would be a challenge. A lot of them are just kind of flying trapezoids in space
Yep.
with gun ports. Sometimes gun ports, not always.
hmm
And what might ship do you think? What warship do you think needs the biggest overhaul?
Mm. That one I probably can't recall great in the moment, but I think it's an inevitability that we'll get to warships and jump ship art. Just, if we've got drop ships and aerospace lying around, then there's going to be books where we want to depict the rest. And, there's kind of been soft updates here and there with like modern color illustrations, where Spooky's gone and made some 3D models of jump ships and maybe the occasional warship. But I would at some point like to push those through like the full redesign process. Um, and again, I don't know how much stuff will change. I think Harebrained Schemes did a great job with their space assets, and now with the MechWarrior 5 clans, they've had a lot of really cool warships there, and some of those kept their silhouettes pretty well. Um, Sometimes it's just the surface details and making the correct things make sense. Like the deck arrangements. I think BattleTech's pretty good about saying your decks are arranged along your thrust axis, but then when it comes to the art, that doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
The Leopard is one of those funky ones where it's an aerodyne, so yeah, in atmosphere under gravity, it makes sense that it's going to fly like a plane, but then you got to start asking, well, when it's in space, how does it fly? Does it keep thrusting with those rear thrusters and now all the deck's gravity changes 90 degrees? Or do you fly it from its hovering thrusters? Which, when we've designed this new one, we've made sure it has the thrusters to land without a runway if it needs to. It's similar to that Harrier jet conundrum where
Hmm.
a Harrier jet can hover, but you don't really want it to hover if it doesn't have to.
Yeah.
It's
It's
ideal if it
hard.
has at least a short runway. So a Leopard would probably like to land like a plane, but if it can, I don't imagine it always doing the MechWarrior 5 style, like hover in, hot drop, and scoot out. Um, but yeah, I'd like to do jump ships and warships to, that's one of the last few things to pull forward with the rest of the art and the setting. But a lot of them have good potential, and yeah, I don't know when that will happen, but I can almost certainly say it will happen.
Okay. Uh, Now, of course, the question that we need to answer for TRO 3025 Centennial Edition. When will we get to see it?
Yeah, and part of we did a pretty hard crunch to get it done, and the goal is that there will be print books at Gen Con. Don't take my word there. There could be delays. You never know.
Yep.
And you never
It's
know
the world we live
how
in.
many. Hopefully it shows up, and a lot of it shows up, because some years we show up with a lot of stock and it lasts a few days. Other times it's gone in 1 hour. I remember that with, I think, the first time Game Armored Combat and Beginner Box were there, or there's been times where we get some advanced copies flown in internationally, so you can only put so many on a plane compared to a shipping container. But yeah, we went with domestic printing on this one to make it as likely as possible to be ready in time, and we did hit our production deadlines, so fingers crossed.
All right. And are you working on anything else currently? Anything else you'd like to share with the group?
Of course, always working on stuff. It never ends. Catalyst would have me do as much as I could possibly do for them, because it's kind of, the community has shown that whatever mechs we redesign for them, they want.
Mm-hmm.
We've yet to find an arrangements of mechs in a pack that people won't buy enormous amounts of. Whereas early on, I was like, guys, we need to be a bit more selective here and slow down. We're going to run out of stuff to do, but we can redesign the most obscure mech and people will want it. There's somebody, well, there's a crowd out there for every mech. So, I mean, a lot of it is just continuing what people, if they pay attention to the press releases, know we're working on. You know, the faction packs. You know, people seem to have really enjoyed the Davian, 2 Davian sets that came out,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know quite when they hit, but the Karita ones are coming next, and those should be just as hot. So we're working on the ones after that, and I'm not sure when the first Aces box is coming, but we have more of those that we'll be doing, and even stuff like, I think Catalyst said we want to do a Word of Blake box and the Society box and an Ares. You know, get the tripod
Oh man,
out in plastic. That one I think is a
that would
funky one, but hey,
yeah, that would
you
make
know.
it affordable. Because right now
Yes, it'll
the
be more
Ares is
affordable.
ridiculous.
It will be smaller because it'll be correctly scaled this time. And you can fully blame me for the enormous metal canvas that is the Ironwind version. But yeah, that's what seems to really push its sales, is the shell is so huge, people put murals on it all the time. And yeah, because what there's stuff of we already kicked out the door that hasn't come yet is obviously I'd like to see the arrivals of the final Star League boxes. Those were supposed to be like every quarter of last year should have had a Star League box, and I think we really pushed the limits of what Leah can manufacture with the Mercenaries Kickstarter.
Mm.
And by the time they're done with that, I think they needed a bit of a slowdown or something, because those taking a bit. Oh yeah, and I'm not sure. I hope they'll be there at Gen Con, but just the little turret box that was previewed at Adepticon. Those were like a cool little thing to have, that, you know, people want turrets on their maps, and being able to design those. That's one where I was given the brief for something basically like, oh, just a bunker and then a light, medium, and a heavy turret, all just like standard gun turrets. I said, no, that's boring. So I turned it into 5 turrets
Mm-hmm.
and mix and match ability, and a missile turret where you kind of Lego piece it together for how many missile boxes you want. So you can go anywhere from a little light LRM or SRM turret to building a full Calliope turret out of it.
That's what I was gonna say. I think your Mech Warrior 4 love is coming in Calliope
Yes,
turret a bit there.
the Calliope had to be done. And then also, okay, what's the scariest thing you can do is Castle Bryan emplacement. So I went there's a lot of these turrets kind of just made up as just as a base could make up whatever kind of gun emplacement they want, but said, hey, let's make sure to do these Castle Bryan emplacements. So the full covered in guns version, and also just there's an anti-personnel turret. I said, hey, that's kind of close to this little quad mini turret we've done, so let's make sure that works as well. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what people think of that, because that's one where there's definitely a lot of third-party competition. A lot of people have put out little turrets. They're pretty easy to make. So when we did it, that's where I put my foot down on expanding the scope of the pack. Is there's no point making this if it's not at least as good, if not better, than what the players can already get. So hopefully people do think it's a good, high-quality set of little stationary emplacements to blow up, or occasionally, have an enormous amount of LRMs and Gauss rifles return fire at them.
I think it's gonna spice up a lot of people's campaign play, and it'll be a really good
Yeah.
addition to Aces when that arrives, and people can
that's a good
start
point.
doing like their own campaigns against the deck as opposed to against each other or having to have a game master. Okay, well, that is it for my regular questions, but nobody gets out of these things without answering a few fun questions. These ones come courtesy of Broken Mnemonic, one of our editors at Sarna. He's got an interesting sense of humor and a long memory. So, starting with the first question, if you could have a subspecies of any known animal named after you, which one would you pick and why?
You're really catching me off guard on this one. Cool animal to have named after you. But then it's going to be called the Scroggins. It's going to be goofy no matter what.
That's pretty great.
Yep. It's got to be either some sea creature, or a little marsupial or something.
Okay, so we're going to go with like raccoon.
Maybe some possum.
Okay. I'll take possum. I think that works great. Okay, second question. If there was a Catalyst Game Labs lunchtime buffet or potluck where everyone had to make something, bring the most surprising dish that you could think of, what would you make and why?
Well, I'm gonna be, instead of surprising, be boring, but a little sadistic, because I like spicy food. And the nice thing is, if you make the food hot enough, you don't have to share it because nobody's gonna try and take it. So one of my favorite things to cook is beef bulgogi, which I think is just a translation of fire beef, and very easy to make at home, very tasty, and I like just chopping up an enormous amount of dried chilies into it and just making it super spicy. But lately I have a lot of friends that like spicy food, so I take that to potlucks and they're like, yeah, bring it again.
Yeah, I'd be all down with that. Okay, now this is where the long memory comes in. If you recall Battle Bronies, that was a suggestion when bronies were still a thing. If you were commissioned to produce a cover for a Battle Bronies core rulebook, what would you put on it?
How many dead ponies can there be? But
I think somebody did a Doom knockoff brony picture, and the answer to that is a mountain's worth.
A mountain. Of course, I like how inclusive the BattleTech community is. That a lot. I see all sorts of people playing the game, be it going to Gen Con or other conventions, or just my local group has an enormous amount of people playing, which is really cool. But I'm also down with the Alex Iglesias has a long line of art of battle mechs committing atrocities upon fursuited creatures and things. So I'm down with the humor there, and I hope people can enjoy that too. But I mean, you got to give it to him. I've seen an enormous amount of brony BattleTech artwork commissioned. If you want it, commission it. Just don't ask me. I'm too busy, and I have done anthro artwork before. It's just not my specialty.
Fair. I hear there's money in it.
There is quite some money.
All right, that's everything I had. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about?
I think we covered it pretty good. I'm definitely excited about the 3025 Centennial Edition. It's we're kind of wondering internally, will this be our Catalyst Game Labs best-selling TRO of all time? Is just going back to the original. I think there's pretty good odds on that. The player base is I think the biggest it's ever been, and it's one that people have a lot of nostalgia for. And it's, Catalyst doesn't put out a lot of enormous TROs. I think other than the compilation ones of kind of putting everything together by Air, which I think is a great idea. It's kind of been since TRO 3145. And that was a long time ago.
That sure was.
It's funny how recent BattleTech history is a long time ago. We're all very old. We need to be reminded of that at all times. The stuff that was our most recent eras was 10 and 15 years ago.
All right. Well, that's everything I had, and thank you again so much for talking to Sarna for TRO 3025 Centennial Edition.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you.